Regular meeting for the Planning Commission. I'm sorry. Good evening and welcome to the Planning Commission regular meeting for July 26th, 2021, starting at 7 p.m. First order of business will be roll call. Commissioner Rasmussen.
Commissioner Bigham.
Here.
Commissioner Fisher.
Here.
Commissioner Frazier.
Here.
Chair Kimbata.
Here.
Commissioner Knable. Here. Commissioner Rasmussen. Here. Commissioner Wright.
Here.
Thank you.
All right. Next is approval of the agenda. If there's no amendments, I'll look for a motion.
Motion to approve.
I have a motion to approve the agenda from Commissioner Frazier. Do we have a second?
Second.
From Commissioner Knable. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries. Item number 4, open forum. This is an opportunity for anyone to speak on an item that is not already on tonight's agenda. If you wish to speak or bring a topic to the podium, please approach the podium and state your name and address for the record. Seeing none, we'll move on. Item 5 is Chair's explanation of the hearing process. The Planning Commission is a volunteer advisory group to the City Council. One of the Commission's functions is to hold public hearings and make recommendations on land use and zoning matters. The purpose of the public hearing is to provide an opportunity for each applicant and citizens to present information, ask questions, and express opinions. Since these proceedings are televised and recorded for the public record, anyone wishing to speak must step up to the podium and give their name and address for the record before addressing the Commission. Staff reports are prepared and provided to the applicant and Planning Commission in advance of the meeting. The first step in the hearing process will be for staff to present a summary of the report. The applicant will then have the opportunity to briefly explain the proposal and provide additional information or comment. Anyone wanting to speak in favor or against the proposal will then be heard. Upon completion of the testimony, the hearing will be closed to the public comment. The Planning Commission will then discuss and act on the matter. 2 complete agenda packets are available for viewing on the back table. Please do not remove these items. The City Council will act on items 6.1, Basic Needs, and 6.2, ICC Edition, at their meeting on Wednesday, August 18th, 2021, which starts at 7 p.m. The agenda items 6.3, Shops at Cottage View, and 6.4, Smallage Fields Water Treatment Plant Preliminary Plat, will be acted on at their meeting on Wednesday, August 4th, 2021, which starts at 7 p.m. Moving on to item 6, public hearings. First will be 6.1, Basic Needs, CUP 2021-054, with Emily Schmitz presenting.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the Commission. The first item before you this evening is an application we've received from Basic Needs Thrift Shop, as well as the property owner United Properties. The site proposed for Basic Needs to enter into is a vacant tenant space within the 80th Street Crossing Mall. It was constructed sometime around the 1950s, so it's been around a long time. But the site is located at the corner of Hadley Avenue and 80th Street. Most of you might know it with the Ace Hardware being the largest tenant in that space. Currently, Basic Needs Thrift Shop is located in St. Paul Park. Recently, they have indicated that they've wanted to focus on finding a new location, expanding their, attract new customers, as well as increase their visibility of their stores. So they've looked at Cottage Grove and found the 80th Street Crossing site to be a perfect location for their store. With that being said, they are a thrift store and therefore do receive some donations. So a conditional use permit is being requested to allow for that drive-through that they are proposing to go along. I'm going to call it the north side of the building for lack of a better way to put it, but excuse me, and then we'll come around the back side of the building where there's a rear door that I've shown in this image down here, where they will use that access for the donations. At that time, I'll talk more specifically about the drive-through and how that will work with the traffic flow as well in the next slide, but I also wanted to note that some new signage will also be proposed or added with this new use as well, in the back of the building as well as in the front of the building. So a little more specifics on the drive-through proposal and how that will kind of work. As you can see in the aerial image, there are currently 8 parking spaces in the back of the building, which will need to be removed to allow for that drive aisle to come around the back side of that building. Staff will indicate that there have not been any concerns with the current parking at this particular mall, so we don't have concern with the removal of those 8 parking spaces being an issue with parking for the site as a whole. Our engineering folks have asked for the applicant and the property owner to provide some striping details, which is what you'll see here on the right hand of the screen, to make sure that we're providing the appropriate arrows and any other directional signage needed to make sure that folks are flowing through the site as they come around the corner for their drop off at the back door, and then of course so that they're able to pull out onto Belden and have a clear line of sight either right or left before they make that turn. So we'll work with the applicant through that to ensure that they're adding all of that signage and striping that makes for a safe transition for that traffic. And then, as I mentioned, the additional signage, I want to make note, I'll go back just a slide, but so they do have some drop-off signage that outlines clearly how that drop-off process works. They will always have an attendant at the door that will take the items directly into the door. And then at times when they are closed, they do have an A-frame sign that will be out in the back indicating they are closed and that no items are to be dropped at that time. Basic Needs has indicated they are currently only open for donations 1 day a week, which they will continue, but they did make note that if they do need additional inventory, they will certainly plan to have some additional days open for those donations. And finally, I just wanted to make note the property owner, with the addition of the tenants in the space, is planning to do some facade improvements, which include replacement of all the windows and the doors on this tenant space, well, on this portion of the mall, rather, as well as painting of the brick facade, the standing seam roof, as well as the sign band. So just sprucing it up a bit with the new tenants. So with that, I will leave the recommendation before you. I know United Properties is here, Bill, as well as Vicki with Basic Needs, if there are any additional questions for those applicants.
Thank you. If the applicant would like to add anything, they may step to the podium and state their name and address for the record. All right. Questions from the commission?
I guess my only question would be, when you're talking about directional signage, are you talking about painting arrows in the parking lot to direct which way to go to the back and then exiting each way onto Belden?
Yes, Mr. Chair, Commissioner Knable, specifically coming around the back side of the building and having that drive aisle on the back side of the building and then out to Belden to make sure there's some clear direction for that traffic.
Are they, can you go back to that slide? Is there going to be any sort of landscaping or landscaping island or any sort of physical barrier between the drop-off lane and that portion of Belden? I know that people could kind of just kind of cut out a line and, you might get a little bit of a traffic jam there.
Sure, Mr. Chair, Commissioners, I think the plan is with the striping of that drive aisle that it should be made very clear with maybe a clear white line. I shouldn't speak in engineer terms that I'm not as savvy with, but I can make certain that there will be some clear striping of that drive aisle, understanding clearly that it's not a very clear transition between the right-of-way and the property line, but we want to make clear that any of the activity for that drive lane through there will be on the private property and not within the right-of-way. As you can see here, these parking stalls actually currently extend within the right-of-way, and that will be removed as a part of this request.
Thank you. Further questions? All right, seeing none, at this time, we'll open public hearing. Anyone wishing to speak for or against the application may do so. Please step to the podium and state your name for the record. Seeing none, we will close public hearing. Further comment from the commission? Commissioner Rasmussen?
I'm happy to see this space get put to a good use. It's been sitting vacant for some time. I think it should help out the mall, the community. I don't see any concerns. I like it.
Yeah, agreed. I'm happy to see some of the vacancies being filled up. All right, with that, if there's no further comment, I'll look for a motion.
Make a motion to approve the conditional use permit, subject to the conditions in the staff report.
We have a motion to approve from Commissioner Frazier. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second from Commissioner Bigham. On the motion to approve the application subject to the conditions outlined in the staff report, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries. On to item 6.2, ICC edition, case SP 2021-053, with Mike Marosla presenting.
Good evening, Chair and Commissioners. Innovative Chemical Corporation has submitted an application for site plan review and proposing an expansion of the current facility. The applicant's proposing an 18,600 square foot addition to the existing facility located at 7769 95th Street South. The property is zoned I2 and is guided as industrial in the land use plan. Thank you. Oh, there we go. Apologies about that. A little background on the project. The city administrator approved a site plan for Innovative Chemical Corporation in May 2004. The site plan included 24,000, almost 25,000 square foot office warehouse facility with a 4,800 square foot mezzanine on 2.86 acres. At the time, the project conformed with all of the I2 district's standards. The site had 50 parking stalls, plus 16 proof of parking as shown on the screen here. Also included at the time was a 9,600 square foot future addition shown on the bottom of the screen, highlighted in red. As you can see, the image on the right is the existing facility located out there today. As previously mentioned, the applicant's proposing an 18,600 square foot addition to the existing facility. As part of the application, there will be a new dock door that is added as part of the facility. Oops. We're just not going to use that. There's a dock door that is proposed to the southern part of the facility. Actually, I'm going to back up a little bit. ICC has been in the community or has been in business for quite some time. They make cleaning materials. They've been in business for 28 years, and they distribute distributors throughout the Midwest, Southern U.S., Caribbean Islands, and in Asia. In addition, they offer contract packaging to companies such as 3M, Ecolab, and Land O'Lakes. As part of this proposal in front of us tonight, they have seen growth and they need additional warehouse space. So the proposed 18,600 square feet would be utilized as warehousing. As you see on the screen on the right side here, this is the proposed elevations. They are intended to match the existing building. They are precast tip-up panels with the same design as the existing building. So it should look like the proposed additions should complement and look like a seamless, be seamless from the existing building out there. Site plan review, as I previously said, this is in the I2 General Industrial District or Industry District. The site is conforming with all of the zoning standards, except for one. The one is the minimum rear yard. In 2000, the city council approved a variance case V00-003, which permitted a 10-foot rear yard setback, which is, the reason for that is there is a drainage way back here, and some of the properties, the way they back up to it, they don't have this easement, such as the subject property, so a little bit more room here to meet setbacks. However, in the case in front of us tonight, there is ample room. There is 35.6 feet. However, that is mainly due to this easement back here that's colored in. There is a existing stormwater sewer line that runs through there. It is worth noting too, as part of this addition, There is some landscaping that was proposed initially that was not installed as part of the initial application back in 2004. The applicant thought at that time they would be doing additions sooner, so they did not install that landscaping. So the landscaping in this general area here, as I'm kind of pointing out here, will need to be relocated on site. There's ample opportunities on the on the southeast side of the building here, and some also along 95th Street to relocate those plantings to make it concurrent with the previously approved plans. The original site plan had 50 parking spaces on there, plus 16 proof. In 2004, when the site plan was approved, the applicant was proposing the 9,600 square foot addition at the rear of the building. That was going to be utilized mainly for manufacturing. Manufacturing requires a more intense parking of 4 plus 1 per 400 square feet. The site would have been underparked with the proposal currently in front of us tonight significantly. However, the applicant now is proposing warehouse, which is a lesser impactful use. It requires 1 space per 2,000 square feet. So currently, with the current parking out there and the proof of parking, the little background proof of parking, it's just, the intent of proof of parking is if there's ever a need for additional parking on site, there is space designated for that parking. So the applicant is still maintaining the 16 stalls adjacent to 95th Street, and 9 additional ones would be created as part of this application. As a condition of approval, the applicant shall work with city staff to install that parking if ever needed. Generally, applicants do that on their own. They know their employees. They know if they need additional parking, they'll do that with any kind of city assistance. However, with that said, the plan in front of us tonight has 71 stalls or would be required under the new parking. They have 75 shown on the plan here, so they are over parked by 4 stalls. As part of this application, due to the size of the proposed addition, they are required to add a stormwater basin on site. The existing site is handled by an off-site stormwater pond that is downstream. Due to the size of this, that stormwater pipe that's there cannot handle it, so they have to build a pond on site. Our engineering staff has reviewed it, and they are okay with the current design of the proposed pond. As a condition of approval, they'll do one more look through to make sure that it meets the final design prior to issuance of a building permit. Also worth noting that existing utilities on site are sufficient to support this use. With that said, that completes my presentation, excuse me. We have one recommendation for tonight for approval of a site plan review, and the applicant is on hand for any questions.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. If the applicant would like to add anything, they may step to the podium and do so. Feeling good? Okay. Questions or comment from the commission?
Yeah, I guess my only question would be, on the existing structure, are there 3 or 4 dock doors?
On the existing structure, there is, oh, sorry, I can't use stuff. I keep on going back to the pen. There is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 dock doors. There's one on the southern side of the building here. The rest of them are facing out towards the drive aisle here.
Are we concerned about the new one being proposed blocking any of those last 3 if they're multiple 52-foot trailers or whatever they're deciding to pull in there? Or are they stationary trailers, or are they constantly moving in and out?
That is a good question. Upon review, we did not have that concern, as we thought that would be limited delivery of staging of trucks at these dock doors. The staging would occur at these doors here. However, if the applicant would like to address that.
Good evening. Paul Narpal, President of Innovative Chemical. On this new proposal, there will be no stationary trailer park. All traffic will be in and out. There are 2 trailers there now that will be removed in the next 60 days or so.
Thank you. Commissioner Wright?
So is this, how much traffic increase will this create? Just based on the need and all that? And is there anything that we need to do with the existing road that's there?
No, it should not impact traffic significantly. The additional space is strictly warehouse. Over the last decade, we have done a lot of upgrade of our equipment, and our manufacturing capacity has increased, but the warehousing has not kept up, so we don't see a significant increase in staff.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Wright? Commissioner Rasmussen?
Now, I've got a quick question regarding the stormwater pond. It appeared that as that pond's gonna be constructed, it's gonna be constructed over the utility easement with the, is it the sewer line maybe that's back there? Is there any concerns with, stormwater pipes and whatnot dumping into that pond? Or if that pond happens to, get filled up and hold water, is any concerns with that being on top of, possibly on top of the utility easement?
Yes, Commissioner, engineering staff has looked at that. We have been provided reports from the applicant showing the bounds of the pond, and if it were to EOF, emergency overflow would be provided at the southern part of the, down here, so it'd go overland into the catch basin back here, I believe. That's my understanding, as I'm getting nodding from the engineering folk over here.
Okay. Thank you. To Commissioner Rasmussen's point, based on the diagrams, it also kind of appears that the stormwater basin is going to overlap with some of the proposed landscaping. How does staff address that overlap as far as the number of trees that are committed to the site? Do they just simply move them, or is that paid back into the landscaping fund, park dedication fund? How does staff typically handle that? Because
Yes,
you
Chair.
obviously can't have both there.
Yep. Yes, so a lot of this planting back here was never planted. So this will all be fresh plantings. So there'll be no tree removal as part of this application. So these trees that are shown in this general area here will be planted elsewhere on site to fill gaps or complement what's out there existing. So there's no tree removal proposed as part of this. And so this is the original approved plan here we're showing.
Okay.
So the original landscaping plan is identified on the screen here. So as part of the conditions of approval, they need to submit an updated landscaping plan showing where these, I believe, I want to say there's 13 of them, where they're going to be located throughout the site.
Okay, thank you. Additional questions or comment? Seeing none, at this time we'll open public hearing. Anyone wishing to speak for or against the application may do so. Please step to the podium and state your name and address for the record. Seeing none, we'll close public hearing. Based on the proposal, I think the variance on the rear yard setback makes sense with that utility easement in place. So I think from a planning standpoint, that represents a hardship, and that would really have been my only objection to this proposal. It looks like you guys are covering the impervious surface with the stormwater catch basin. It looks pretty well thought out.
I have one quick question. You had said initially those trees were not planted. What is the normal timeframe for those types of things to be completed once a building is constructed? And how, because if this happened in 2004, I mean, that's quite a long time where those never happened, and those are a pretty big part of what we look for and what we require as a city. So moving forward, after they do this addition, what is the timeframe where all of that landscaping will need to be completed?
Generally, we like to see it done within a year. Like, there's certain times of the year you can't do it. Like right now, when it's so hot, we don't recommend doing it. A lot of times we do a lot of tree plantings in the fall. My understanding, looking back at the case file, was there was some kind of agreement with the staff at the time not to plant those trees because the security was released for the tree plantings. A lot of times we hold security to ensure that the plantings are planted. So there is a condition of approval that requires the applicant to provide 150% the cost of the landscaping, and we would hold on to that to ensure that it's planted. And so we usually collect that fee at the time of issuance of a building permit. So that'll ensure the planting of the trees. Otherwise, we would utilize those funds to plant the trees.
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you. Additional questions or comment? At this time, I would look for a motion.
I'd motion to approve the case SP 2021-053, subject to conditions in the staff report.
Okay, we have a motion to approve the site plan. Do we have a second?
Second.
From Commissioner Wright. On the motion to approve the site plan, subject to the conditions outlined in the staff report, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries. On to item 6.3, Shops at Cottage View, case PP 2021 2023-050 with Emily Schmitz presenting.
All right, Mr. Chair, members of the commission, the next item on your agenda is an application that was actually submitted by the city of Cottage Grove. It is a preliminary plat application to be known as the Shops at Cottage View. The proposed site location for this plat is located at the corner of East Point Douglas and Keats Avenue. A lot of folks might know it as the Danner Apache site, which received its original approval, I believe, around 2009 timeframe for the extraction of materials from the site, and that activity has been taking place on the site since that time. And then in 2019, an additional grading permit was issued by the city as well for some grading to take place that might set the site up for some future development. And I think it's worth noting at that time, the city did apply for some grant dollars to help promote the redevelopment of the site as well, so the city has been involved in that process. As you can see, the proposed plat does create 3 new lots, Lot 1, Lot 2, and Lot 3, on the site, as well as 1 outlot, which I'll touch on just a little bit more in a brief moment. But it's important to note that this plat is a proactive measure. The city has submitted for some grant funding through some federal grant dollars, which would allow this or help the city to install the roadway, Cottage View Drive, which will be the east-west kind of main roadway through this future development, as well as the southerly end of Ravine Parkway into this particular redevelopment. And in order to be eligible for these grant dollars, the city does need to be in ownership of that right-of-way. Therefore, the plat in front of you this evening to kind of solidify those right-of-way areas and get that right-of-way in the ownership of the city. So the city has been working with the property owner to get to this point. And then I'll briefly touch on the outlet, just to clarify. So Walmart is directly to the west, and they currently do have an access. This particular access off of East Point is existing. So as the site begins or starts to redevelop and Cottage View Drive is installed, we just need to tweak the current access from Walmart onto Cottage View Drive just a bit to allow some additional stacking. But I won't get into too many details, which leads me to my next slide as we talk about the future use of the site. We need to make sure that it's very clear that additional applications will be required for any development that may be proposed on the site. It could be additional plats, site plan reviews, things of that nature, but that will be a completely separate application, and we'll get into the specifics of that development at that time. And again, any future roadways will be a part of those approvals, and as I mentioned, this again is a proactive measure, hoping that the city will be eligible for those grant dollars to install some infrastructure to maybe nudge the development along just a bit. So with that, I will leave the recommendation before you, and I'm certainly available for any questions you may have.
Thank you. Questions or comments from the commission? Commissioner Rasmussen?
Looking at the preliminary plat, and as a pretty heavy user of the bike trails here in town, I know there was a connection between Ravine Park, possibly. Was it a trail connection possibly going into this development? Is that location, is that still part of the plan? Do we know where it's going to land or how it's going to work?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Rasmussen, I believe that is still in the plans. I hope I am not speaking out of turn. Long-term plan, I believe the trail connection is to connect to the Ravine Parkway, excuse me, that is on the east side of Keats Avenue. So I know long-term, but still a part of the plan.
And that was going to be my follow-up question is, so where this right-of-way exits onto Highway 19, that is going to approximately line up with the current entrance to the Ravine Park on the east side of Highway 19, is that correct?
No, it's no way.
I will defer to Assistant City Engineer Amanda Meyer to clarify.
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, so that access off of Keats is about in the same proximity as the access to the Ravine Regional Park. And regarding the trail crossing, the city does continue to communicate with the county as they work through their capital improvement planning. So that would be something that we could continue to comment on to be a priority if we can move forward with some federal grant funding on this project.
Perfect, thank you. Additional questions or comment?
Yeah, I guess my question would be, let's say that we are not getting any federal grants. Where are we at for progressing here? Because it says August 2021, so we have some time, so I feel like we're a little early in asking for it. Shouldn't we have found out by now if we're getting it or not?
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, so great question. We did apply for the federal grant funding through Andrew Craig's office, Tina Smith's office, and Amy Klobuchar's office. Our understanding is we should hear back sometime in August about whether or not we've received that funding.
All right, thank you.
So then a follow-up would be, what is the plan B when that federal funding doesn't come through, or?
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, we would just have to reevaluate. I believe our plan was that we could do some phasing, so if we got a partial funding, we could do pieces of the project, but we would just have to reevaluate based on how much money or no money we receive from the federal grant.
Okay. Then my next-
Follow-up question to his follow-up question. In the event that we didn't get any federal funding, the next most probable way to develop this area would be through some sort of TIF financing. If the land property owner were to get somebody that wanted to start building out that project, we would kind of front load the cost burden onto the eventual developer. Is that my understanding?
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, I believe that is true, that we could potentially go through a TIF funding, but I would probably have to defer to our finance team, and we could definitely report back to you on that one.
So worst case scenario is we've developed the right of ways for the eventual development. It just may not happen as quickly as the city would like. Is that correct?
Yes, and Mr. Chair, members of the commission, my understanding is this is a proactive approach. I believe we would wait to ensure that we are in line to get some federal funding to actually record the plat. So we wouldn't necessarily record the plat right away, just to make sure that we aren't kind of cart before the horse on this.
Okay. So this is preparing us to be eligible for funding, but in the absence of that funding, this can sit idle without causing any detriment to the property owner?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, if I might add, so two-prong approach here. First being grant eligible, having that right away in place if we were to receive that grant funding. But secondly, it does help kind of get get things rolling in terms of future development on the site. Obviously, the northeast corner of this site would be the potential location for the community center, as well as we're trying to market the northwest corner of the site for future residential development. So A, it does help, it makes us eligible for that grant funding, but B, it also kind of gets the ball rolling, like I said, for future development on the site.
Kind of gives potential end users an idea of what the site plan will look like?
Correct.
Okay.
If the federal funding comes through, what's the timeline on that? As a employee of the federal government, it can take some time. Does anybody have an idea if that were to actually happen? Does anybody have an idea what that timeline would look like to get those funds?
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, my understanding is it would be 2022 that we'd be working with that money to do the construction. So if we hear that we do get that federal funding, we would jump right into the design of the utilities and the street construction so we could get that work going next year.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Follow-up questions?
I guess I just had another question, just one more, sorry. Just on Ravine Parkway, are we talking Ravine Parkway going into, I want to say that's Jurgen Avenue South, or is that its own separate entity that's going to go up and connect into the Ravine Parkway up by going into City Hall?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, members of the commission, so this section of Ravine Parkway would be stubbed, I believe just north of here is just some farm field, so it eventually would route north and would eventually tie into the existing intersection of 90th and Keats Avenue. So there's a little bit of realignment that would need to happen with 90th Street with future development just north of this parcel.
I have a
Thank you.
question. So does the city own this property now, or has it purchased it, or does the original owner own it, or where is it in ownership situation?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Fisher, excuse me, we do not currently own the property. The property owner, Jerry Herringer, owns the property. We are just working proactively, understanding that we would receive those grant dollars, so we're being proactive in working through this plating process as the folks who would ultimately obtain that right of way as a part of this particular plat. Does
Okay,
that
so the city
help?
would purchase it eventually? Is that what I'm understanding?
Nope, the right of way would be dedicated
Okay, I understand.
by the
Thank
property
you.
owner. Yep, understanding that future development will occur.
Gotcha.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you. If we have no further questions, I'd look for a motion. Oh, I'm sorry. Let's back that up. If we have no further questions, we're going to open public hearing. Anyone wishing to speak for or against the application may step to the podium, state your name and address for the record.
Gabriel Shore, 79 110th Street. I just had a question. Well, they took down the map. How is the snowmobile trail going to continue? That kind of cuts the snowmobile trail right through. Where's the right of way for that?
Can staff pull up that map? And I think
So
this,
currently, the snowmobile trail goes diagonally right across that piece of property and goes to the red barn behind the Walmart. So is that right of way going to be maintained? How do we get there?
that's a question we would have to defer to staff on. If they have insight.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, members of the commission, that's not some information that I'm privy to. I know the Snowmobile Club works with maybe our public safety department on those routes, along with potential property owners. So I apologize, I don't know the specifics, but we can certainly get that clarified.
So my current understanding of that snowmobile trail system is that it's mostly volunteer, and they have to have permission from the property owners. I would assume that until any actual development happens, there would be no change unless the property owner no longer gave permission for the trail use. But we can have staff reach out and get a more definitive response to that. Anyone else wishing to speak for or against the application?
Hi, Robin Johnson, 9483 Jurgen Avenue South, right up there. Newbie, never done this before, so bear with me. Couple of questions. So you said with Ravine Parkway, you can only do this if you have the right-of-way from the current property owner, which is the farmer? Is that right? No? Yes?
Why don't we do this? Why don't we have you state your whole question, and then we'll have staff respond.
Okay, great. So just wondering if that right-of-way has been given, if you already have that, for that future Ravine Parkway. The other question I have is, do you know how far behind the current properties that are there along Jurgen Avenue, what that distance is, where that road is gonna be behind all of our homes? Just general idea. And then other question is, you said that the city will not own this property down here, so it'll be the current property owner that will that property owner have the choice in who they choose to have develop it, or does the city have a say in that?
The city has a say in the standards that the future build-out is done to. However, the sale is going to be between the owner, a private seller, and whoever the end developer is, a private buyer. The city doesn't really get to intervene in that. They'll just be able to say, buildings have to have certain setbacks and certain architectural standards. And then they, just like in this case, they try and be 2 steps ahead of what's coming. And that's why they're trying to get some of these preliminary steps taken care of, so that when the current owner finally does find somebody that wants to develop it, the groundwork has been laid so that it can be successful.
Okay.
But back, if that's the end of your questions, I think we would have to defer back to the city staff on what the northern part of Ravine Parkway would look like. And again, that's still under private ownership as well. So anything is going to be somewhat, prospective. So with that, we'll get staff back up here.
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, I think she had 3 separate questions, so I'll do my very best. So I think your first question was, do we already have the right-of-way? And the answer is no. So this plat dedicates that right-of-way to the city, and then it will then be under city's ownership at that time. So currently, as it sits, the property owner still maintains all of this property, or until such time this plat is recorded, which then would dedicate that right-of-way, which of course is dependent upon the federal funding grant. Her second question was the distance of the Ravine Parkway right-of-way from the Jurgen Avenue residence. And we may have to follow up to get you a specific distance of kind of how that lays out, so I don't go astray with that. But I think we can get you a better visual or a better idea of the space between that future Ravine Parkway and those residents that are there. And then, Mr. Chair, you answered her third question, I believe, but ultimately, the remaining parcels as a part of this plat will be owned and maintained by the current property owner until such time a development is approved, which again, as I had indicated, is a completely separate application that would come before the Planning Commission, ultimately City Council, before any of that activity would begin.
Mr. Chair, if I could follow up as well. So I just did a quick measurement. It looks to be about 500 to 600 feet east of the back of the single-family homes on Jurgen where that alignment occurs. So it's roughly in that range. And then just to point out, the right-of-way dedication is part of the development process. Yes, typically you'll have the plat come in with a site plan application, the details, and that right-of-way is dedicated through that process in kind as part of the development process. So it's my understanding that Mr. Herringer is willing to provide that right-of-way as part of, developing this land, again, being proactive, dedicating it ahead of time to kind of set these parcels in place to A, again, allow for that grant funding should we receive it, and B, set the tone for future development on the site.
All right, thank you. Additional questions, comment?
I guess my last question would be on the proposal screen that we have up currently. The homes here on the south side, the top of the Lot 1, Block 2, the utility easements, how far back are those? I can't really tell from here. I mean, are there gas lines running behind or utility lines running behind where we'd have to come back down before it could be developed?
Mr. Chair, Planning Commissioner Knable, it's 110 feet of total easement there. So any development to the south of those homes would be set back a minimum of 110 feet.
Okay.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak for or against the application may step to the podium, state your name and address for the record.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Lauren Wilkinson, 9382 Jurgen Place South, also just up there. So currently, Jurgen Avenue South dead ends, and Ravine is going to be running approximately 500 to 600 feet the other direction. Are there plans to open Jurgen Avenue South to development, or is that going to stay closed forever?
Mr. Chair, I think I can answer that. I do not believe there are plans to connect. There's quite a bit of elevation drop there as you come south from Jurgen. So I don't think at this point the intent is to provide that connection. I don't know if, Amanda, if you have any indication on future plans, but that topography makes it really challenging to provide a connection at that point.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak for or against the application may step to the podium and state your name and address for the record. Seeing none, we'll close public hearing. Further questions or comment? Commissioner Frazier.
So I just have a quick question, and just to clarify, so, because I think part of the question too was the right-of-way north of this property now. We're not dealing with that tonight. It's only Ravine Parkway to the boundary of the property we're talking about, correct?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Fraser, you are exactly right.
So any future Ravine Parkway north of that property, that would be a separate application and a separate time, that there would be a separate public hearing then to talk about that property going through?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Additional questions or comment?
I guess my only last comment would be that we are just hoping for the federal funding so we don't have to kind of go a different route to try to find somebody to help us finance this. So I think we're a little early until we hear like what's coming through. I guess that's not my specialty, but that's just my feeling on this. So that's how I'll end.
I will say that this parcel has been a topic of conversation, I think, the entire time that I've been a member of this commission, both as a member and as chair. And it's kind of evolved into this, and I do think this is the smartest layout for it. I know that at one point, I think it was just gonna be one large parcel with a large, maybe only one way in and out. So, this seems to make more sense. So I'm kind of glad to see that it's kind of shifted the traffic closer to 19. I think in the original version, that was a concern for people as well, was how is traffic going to flow through the pre-existing neighborhoods? And I think this is kind of blank slate with regard to this parcel. So I like to see that. Questions or comment? If there are no further questions or comment, at this time I would look for a motion.
I guess I'll just make a quick comment, and then I'll make a motion. I guess to Commissioner Knabel's point, I think we are early, but based on the representations from city staff and the director, we're not gonna lose anything. It's not gonna harm anything to go forward with this now. If the federal funding doesn't appear, the city's not gonna do it in this fashion. This is just trying to get things moving so that as soon as we get the money, we're ready to go on it. And so with that understanding, I'm gonna make a motion to approve the preliminary plat subject to the conditions in the staff report.
Thank you, Commissioner Frazier. We have a motion to approve from Commissioner Frazier, subject to the stipulations stated in the staff report. Do we have a second?
Second.
A second from Commissioner Bigham. Further conversation? Objections or concerns? Seeing none? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
Nay.
With 6 ayes and 1 nay. On to item 6.4, Water Treatment Plant Preliminary Plat, case PP 2021-057, with Sam Burns presenting.
Good evening, Commissioners, Mr. Chair. So the last item on the agenda for this evening is a preliminary plat application on behalf of the city of Cottage Grove, to be known as Smallage Fields. Some background on the site: it is located south of Highway 61, on the northeast corner of the intersection of Ideal Avenue, so many I names, and 110th Street. So the current site is owned by Gene and Louise Smallage. It's currently used for agriculture, as you can see, though it is guided for industrial use in the 2040 comprehensive plan. So the proposal is to plat the current 57.68 acre parcel into 2 equally sized 28.84 acre lots, to be known as Smallage Fields. The city plans to purchase this newly created southern parcel in order to further explore building a drinking water treatment facility on the site. As you can see here, this is a proposed platting moving forward. Future use, this application and public hearing is only for the platting of the parent parcel into the 2 smaller parcels that would be known as Smallage Fields. Any future improvements, construction, or changes to the property will require a separate application and further review by the Planning Commission and City Council. The entire process will be done. If any improvements or constructions are to be moved forward, that includes public hearing and options to share any questions or concerns. With that, we'll leave you with the recommendation that the Planning Commission recommends to the City Council approval of the Smallage Fields preliminary plat, subject to the listed conditions of approval.
Thank you, sir. Questions from the commission? I've got one. So subdividing this land now does not initiate the development, the immediate development of a water treatment facility. Is that correct?
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, that is correct, yes.
And any eventual development on this will require, as you'd stated, another application with another review process.
Absolutely. This is just altering the existing parcel.
So we're just drawing lines on a map.
Correct.
Can you identify what, an example of maybe another water treatment facility that might already exist? That would be a good example of what the, neighboring property owners might expect
Yeah.
to eventually happen here?
That's a really good question. I don't have specifically an example or a visual aid to share with you this evening. A lot of times people think water treatment plant, they think scary, big industrial use. That's not quite the case at all. It is a drinking water treatment facility. There'll be minimal traffic in and out of the site. And it's just, something that's needed and conditioned as a part of the 3M settlement that took place a number of years ago. Again, this proposal, as was referenced, is purely just for the subplatting.
Because the water treatment facilities that I envision are, a plain kind of looking shed where they're just basically pumping water out of the well and filtering it, and it's kind of going out, and it's going into the, infrastructure that's pre-existing.
Yeah, that's correct. And actually, Amanda will talk a little bit about the engineering side of things.
Mr. Chair, members of the commission. So right now, the city of Cottage Grove has 3 temporary water treatment plants, all of which are temporary buildings. So we did build them such that they could be torn down. So if you use those as an example, the ones that we would build for future, permanent water treatment plants, we would make sure that those meet our architectural standards. They would have color schemes that match the surrounding areas and those types of things. With this water treatment plant, specifically, just a couple things to note. So one of the reasons we were looking at this property particularly is it is industrially zoned. So we do want to have the water treatment plant in an industrial zoned area. And it would be directly adjacent to our South District sewer project. We will have some sewage discharge from that drinking water treatment plant. So having that treatment plant close by to our major trunk sewer is a huge benefit. Some other items just to note regarding this plant. We do need a plant down in this pressure zone, so we would need something down in this area. So being that this property is guided for industrial and adjacent to that South District sewer and in that pressure zone, this did look to be a really great option for the city. And one other note, just regarding truck traffic in this area, just to note, the only truck traffic that we would anticipate for this structure would be for the replacement of the carbon for the filters, which happens once every 3 to 5 years. And this building would be designed that work could all take place within the building. So the truck would arrive, pull into the building, would either remove the carbon or be replacing the carbon, but that would all be within that structure and roughly once every 3 to 5 years or so.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, could I comment as well? Just a quick follow-up. So future development of the property would require a site plan review process, obviously. And Amanda touched on the fact that architectural standards will have to be met. Other items such as setbacks and screening will also be reviewed through that process, as you guys know. So taking into consideration some of the adjacent uses and trying to minimize impact to those adjacent uses will be reviewed through that process.
Perfect. Thank you, sir.
Yep.
Additional questions or comment? Seeing none, at this time, we will open public hearing. Anyone wishing to speak for or against the application You may step to the podium, state your name and address for the record.
Hi, this is Connie House, 8234 110th Street. If you purchased this land, or did, is it 100% that you're going to put a water treatment site there? Or could it change to a water sewer plant?
Let's, just as with the other commenters, let's get your entire question, and then we'll have.
And
then-
also, what about sewer seepage? What is that?
So your questions are, could this water treatment plant ever become a sewage treatment plant?
Yep.
And the second part of that question was, what sort of sewage or wastewater byproduct could result from the water treatment plant?
Well, she said something about sewer leakage or sewer something.
Okay.
Something.
We'll have Amanda take
And also,
Take a shot at this.
how far from the property line will this be?
whatever the city code is for setback. Again, that's kind of next application process. But I'm sure they could give a general idea of that here. Are those the questions that you want to get responses to?
Yep.
Okay. Then we'll defer this over to staff and see what they can do for us here.
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, so at this point, this property is only being viewed for a drinking water treatment plant. The city is at, my understanding, we are not in the business of looking for a site for a wastewater treatment plant. We have been working for many months, years with the state and 3M to get a permanent drinking water treatment process within the city. And so this is only drinking water treatment that we would be looking to this site for. In regards to the sanitary sewer, the city this year is working to install a trunk sanitary sewer line from the Met Council line, which is a couple miles east of here, and so we'll be installing a trunk sanitary sewer up to Ideal Avenue, just on the northern side. I believe we'll be crossing up generally in this area, so it is in close proximity to the proposed drinking water treatment plant so that we can run a sanitary sewer pipe from that plant to the trunk sewer system to discharge any sewage that is generated through the process.
I think, and my question is, can you explain how the water filtration process could result in wastewater?
So generally speaking, Mr. Chair, members of the commission, so as the water is filtered, there is a process of backwashing the filters. So as water comes through the filters, it is trapping particles and anything that's coming up from the groundwater. And every so often, those filters do have to be backwashed. I believe some of that water is discharged through that sanitary sewer.
Okay.
And as far as the setbacks, I will default to the planning department.
That would be Sam.
Yeah, absolutely. So the setback specifically, as was referenced by the director, this application is purely for subdividing the parcel. At a later date, if the water drinking treatment plant moves forward, questions about setbacks and screening will be addressed then. There'll be an opportunity to share concerns and have questions answered in that moment in time. But I can confidently say that, any building standards will be followed and abided by in that moment as the application for the actual water treatment facility moves forward.
Not specific to this application, but do you happen to know what the normal setback for Ideal Avenue would be?
That's a good question. And industrial, not off the top of my head. I would have to consult city code.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, I have the code pulled up. So specifically, it looks like for the I-2 district, which I think would be the zoning for this property, we'd be looking at a 40-foot side yard setback, so that would be to the east. And then in terms of a front yard setback, depending on how the building's orientated, we would be looking at 40 feet as well. Those are minimums. Looking at the site itself, it's a fairly large property, so my assumption is that facility would be centered on that property, so your setback most likely is going to be much larger than that 40-foot minimum.
All right. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Sam. Anyone else wishing to speak for or against the application? May you step to the podium, state your name and address for the record?
Aaron Zivick, 7980 113th Street South. With that trunk that's coming in for the sewage, it's roughly, I think that blue line indicates like a easement, right, power line. I don't know if everybody knows, but there's some development that's going on to the north of this, and there will be a road, I think it's 105th. Would that traffic be coming down to 110th, or would it be on that 105th? It sounds like this is kind of timed to go with that sewage.
Are you asking if the construction traffic or?
Well, the construction traffic's gonna be what it's gonna be, but eventually with that sewage line that's coming into the north, there is a road that's gonna go with that. You know, I've kind of been on the 2040
Yep.
plan,
Yep.
kind of following some of that. And there's a main collector road, I think, that's been proposed. With that traffic, you know, it's one thing for me, I live kitty corner kind of to this. It's one thing to have the building there, it's another thing to have all the traffic or whatever it is, but if it's diverted to the north side, it, you know, it eases it a little bit.
Are you asking, so just traffic in general is gonna be
Is
routed
it's
through-
gonna be set up to have the entrances to the south off 110th, or is it planned to have that, you know, cause sounds like it's time to go with that sewage trunkage, in which a road would be there. And I guess my second question is it is a little bit news to me that this is kind of future industrial, but why isn't it closer to 100th Street and away from the houses versus 110th?
Well, I'll defer to the staff and to the planning staff on this one.
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, in regard to the traffic, specifically as it relates to the drinking water treatment plant, it'd be very minimal traffic. We'd have staff popping down there every so often just to be monitoring and doing some checking of different things at the plant. And then again, it would just be those trucks every 3 to 5 years or so doing the replacement of the carbon media from the filters. So the traffic impact would be pretty minimal as it relates to the drinking water treatment plant. In regards to the 105th Street and the sewer extension, staff is working very closely with potential developers in that area to ensure that traffic is routed along 105th Street to Ideal to the north. And it is probably also worth mentioning that 100th Street just north of here will become a future county road that is programmed as part of that south arterial study that the county has been doing to get traffic from Innovation Road down 100th Street to 103rd and ultimately to Gray Cloud Trail. So 100th Street, as things are developing adjacent to 100th, we will be looking to kind of beef up that roadway a little bit, add some turn lanes and such for the additional traffic that would be north of here as part of those developments. But that's a bit of a side note. And then the second question.
Regarding the specific site location that the city identified for this.
Clarify, seems odd that it's right on Ideal when we have the water treatment that's currently there, I mean sewage to the east. It seems like it either should be east or north. But I mean, if this is industrial, that's part of it, I guess, but.
Aaron, if you could step up to the podium, because so that we're on record here.
If this is industrial, something's gonna go there. I'm not like overly opposed to anything, but as far as the water treatment, I think a lot of people in Cottage Grove don't even know that we have the water treatment that's at the end of 110th. To me, it seems like this would be more logical to either be more east or more north. And like I said, if this is future industrial, I mean, something's gonna go there. Water treatment plant might be the least of the, least concern for us. But my main concern is, like I said, that even though it's minimal traffic, that 105th would take that traffic, so it's not kind of going around the 100 or Ideal to 110th. So, but obviously there's been some discussion about this is a good place for this, whether it's pressure wise, the way the city has plumbed the water, but.
Mr. Chair, I can note on the land use. So the 2040 comprehensive plan has this parcel and parcels to the east all guided industrial. Across Ideal to the west is residential, and then of course to the south with River Acres is also zoned residential. In terms of location, we're kind of landlocked by 3M as you head east. So there's limited availability in terms of property, undeveloped property with location. We have obviously a willing land seller in terms of the city locating at this parcel. And then again, just to note, when you have different uses abutting each other, in terms of industrial to residential, that's where our site plan requirements kick in and have the screening requirements and the setback requirements, et cetera, to help mitigate those concerns when we go through the site planning process.
Okay? So combination of opportunity and proximity to other infrastructure.
Correct.
All right, thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak for or against the application? May step to the podium and state your name and address for the record.
What percent of that are you, is 100%?
Nope. I need you to step to the podium.
I asked the question, I didn't answer.
Then let's have you step to the podium and we can readdress the question.
It's for record.
Is it 100% that the water treatment center is going to go on the southern part of that?
I believe that is correct. The parcel is being subdivided so that the city can purchase the southern half of that parcel.
For a water treatment?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, it's also worth noting, we are still waiting for the state to finalize their ultimate drinking water supply plan. So that is part of, we are trying to be proactive, get this platted so the city can continue to move forward with the land acquisition, but we are still waiting for the finalization of that plan from the state to be able to move forward with additional applications for that plant.
All right, thank you. To further clarify for that previous speaker, if there was to be any alteration to the end use of this property, that again would come through the planning process, and it would again have to be approved by the planning commission and then by city council. So any further deviation or redevelopment of this property would not be without a great deal of advance notice. Yes, sir.
Gabe Shore, 7979, a little
Yes.
house in the corner. Since we're here, I just want to ask if they knew what the percentage of going north or south. Because I built quite a few pump houses, and generally, they just look like a large house. They're very nice looking, and if it was to the south, it'd actually benefit our neighborhood. It would look like a big house. And they could probably put in a pond or something like that. But
The specific location of the building on the parcel is going to be split in half.
right.
And as was previously stated, the specific position of that building is not yet known because they are not that far in the process. That would be a question that could be answered at a later date.
Where could we follow the progress on that?
On the city website, and then planning commissions meet the fourth Monday of every month, and city council meetings are the first and third Wednesdays of the month, and you can follow those dates and those agendas online.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair, I'll also add that the site plan process, so for any future construction on the site, individual notices will go to each property owner within 500 feet, similar to what was sent for this application. So if and when development plans come through this body, you'll receive notice if you live within 500 feet of the property.
Thank you, sir.
Aaron Zivick again, 7980 113th Street. My question is about the parcels being divided. I sat in a meeting one time with, I think it was a future Anderson window. Obviously, this is all in my proximity. And there was a question asked, I don't remember who it was, but they proposed to divide a parcel. And someone asked, well, why are we dividing it if they're likely to expand and take, the other part that we are dividing? What is the purpose for dividing this? Is it allow for like a future expansion? Is it allowing, or is it in plan to build two separate buildings? I'm curious why there's two separate parcels. Why not take the whole thing and be done?
Good question.
Mr. Chair, it's my understanding that the city would only need the southern half, so that's the precipice for subdividing the property in half, where the property owner then would sell off the northern half of the property for a different development in the future.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak for or against the application may step to the podium. Seeing none, we will close public hearing. Further questions or comment from the commission? I think every time we get one of these applications, it sounds a little scary. Again, like water treatment, what does that mean? I'm not an expert on that either. However, having gone with the 3M settlement, having seen several of these applications pass for the actual temporary facilities to be operated, and I've driven past several of them. Again, I think they're pretty good at conforming with the neighborhood. If you didn't know what they were, such as in our case, you would never think twice about them. So from that standpoint, I think there's no real fear of, some big ugly industrial building popping up right next to your house. I think we've been pretty good on this commission of kind of holding the city staff accountable to some of those building standards as far as the materials and screening and site planning. And additionally, I think what we're doing here is really just kind of getting ready for that settlement money that's coming to put in a permanent facility. And to the staff's comment, we have 3 temporary facilities. Those things are expensive to run. I think long-term, this is a good investment for the city. So, Commissioner Wright?
I just want to say thank you for coming here, because it's nice to see that people kind of get involved with it. Yes, of course, it affects you in a certain way, but understand this is one of the many processes, right? There's still many things that have to happen before this actually happens. But if you guys are engaged during that process, it only benefits you because you guys have that input. This is, the city's very good at listening to that feedback. So keep coming. Keep it cordial. Keep it, good. You guys have been great. Good crowd. Appreciate it. But just stay involved. We'll work through the process and we'll get through it.
Thank you, sir. Additional comment, questions? At this time, I would look for a motion.
Motion to approve preliminary plat 2021-057, subject to staff report.
We have a motion to approve the the preliminary plat, subject to the stipulations outlined in the staff report from Commissioner Rasmussen. Do we have a second?
I second.
I have a second from Commissioner Knable. Further discussion? All right, at this time, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. On to item 7, approval of Planning Commission minutes for June 28th, 2021. If there are no questions or amendments to those minutes, I would look for a motion.
So moved.
I have a motion to approve from Commissioner Frazier. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second from Commissioner Fisher. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries 7-0. I'd like to just take a moment and comment and thank all of the community members for stopping by today and letting their voices be heard. On to item 8. 8.1, recap of City Council, July City Council meetings.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the Planning Commission. So we did not have a council meeting the first week of July due to the holiday, but we did have a council workshop on July 14th where the council discussed 3 potential development projects with the developers for those projects, one being for a proposed 48-unit multifamily affordable development at 6961 East Point Douglas Road. That's just, I guess, north and west of the Legends, that being for Bethesda Lutheran. So that one potentially could be coming before you somewhat soon. Another development project, which is for a 3-story, 31-unit market rate apartment off of Hardwood and Harkness, just directly north of the Apadan project that was recently approved. And then finally, a workshop regarding Cedarhurst, which was essentially an update from the developer on kind of where they are and a discussion with council. And then following that, on the 21st, last week, we had 2 items on the council agenda, one being the variance for 8401 River Acres Road, which was reviewed by this group last month, which was approved. And then the Rolling Meadows zoning amendment and preliminary plat was also approved by council. So with that, I will turn it to Mr. Dennis for his update.
All right, thank you, Director Boyk. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for your service here tonight. I will open myself up to any questions that you might have of me.
Thank you. Commissioner Rasmussen.
I have a question on Cottage Grove population. I feel like we've had aggressive growth the last several years, and we had a recent census, I think, happened last year. When do we get those numbers? When do we see what our growth really has looked like in the last few years?
So I don't know exactly when we're going to receive them, but I do believe we're going to be very close to 40,000, I think is where we're going to hit.
And we were at 36 or something?
We had been bouncing around 36, 37 for quite a while. And, what we average is 3.2 people per household every time there's a new home built. So if you kind of look at the numbers that we've had this year, we're anticipating about 600 total houses. We've not had quite that much the last few years, but very high totals. So looking at the fact that it's been, 10 years of time, I think you're going to see we're pretty close to that 40,000 mark.
Wonderful. Does that mean we get a movie theater now?
We'll keep trying. Remember, we have the ability to bring that sign back, so.
Additional questions?
I guess to that point, I have a question too. In what part in the planning, obviously adding to the population and those numbers increasing, when does the school district come in? When do they come into play as far as, we're talking about new homes and then, with new homes and, single family homes, obviously with children, and there's 5, 10-year, 15-year increments, I'm sure. But when do they come into that conversation?
Well,
and maybe that's a question for you.
No, they're already in the conversation, and I know that we meet with them at least once a month to discuss certain things. And one of the things that I do is I serve the community as council liaison to the board of directors for the Chamber of Commerce. And so every month we get an update from Mr. Dan Pine, and he is the financial guru for the school district. And so one of the things that they've been looking at, how we grow and how we keep the numbers up so we can serve everyone properly. But one of the interesting things that has taken place in the time of COVID is that they actually lost what I will call a number of customers, where children were pulled out of the public schools either to be entering into private schooling or homeschooling. So right now, their plans are still scalable. They're still looking at what they can do, and this was actually something that came up as a question at the last meeting, where people were just seeking to understand what they're looking at. Now, one thing I will share is that they are anticipating a referendum this fall of some kind. I think there's going to be one for operations, and then there might be something additional, but they indicated they're not going to release that information until sometime in August. So, we are separate entities, legal, in course of what our purviews are. And so, what you kind of do is you look at, a city, and I learned about this when I ran for election in 2014. I wanted to really learn about economic development, what it is, what it means, how it happens. And a couple of things that I found in my research were very interesting to me. There's a couple primary considerations that every city has. The first one is to do what I call maintaining the promise or keeping the promise, which is to return great service and core functions back to the people. As residents, we all pay property tax in, and that money is utilized to provide things like police, fire, EMS, taking care of our roads, both through patching and replacement, snow removal. various other applications, making sure we've got good drinking water, right? You turn your water on, it comes pouring out. So those are the core services. And then the other thing is, a city is very much like a private sector business, except we use some different terminology. So in a business, we'd like to grow our sales to the top end, right? Sell more product. For a city, it grows the tax base. And so that tax base is what allows us to be able to afford opportunities and to keep our promises and kind of spread that load and that shoulder of weight that we carry out to more rather than fewer. So it's a more manageable task of paying those bills for our taxes. So those are really the things that come, along with, of course, working on behalf of our residents and listening and trying to do what is in the best interest of the people here. So that's kind of what we do. They do it to a little bit different degree. They're dealing with their customers, which are the school children, and also the parents that they work with. So, but I think there's a good amicable relationship between both entities, and I feel positive about that. And I don't have full specific details, but I think they'll be releasing some information here sometime next month.
Thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, just to follow up, we do provide the school district information on new home permits every 2 weeks. So as part of their planning process, we're providing the actual addresses of those new home permits so they know specifically the location.
Vote it in or something.
They
Okay.
plug it into their formula and that helps them plan for the future, so.
Thank you. Additional questions or comment? No? Thanks for doing good work.
Thank you, sir. Good night, everyone.
Thank you.
Item 8.2 is response to planning commission inquiries. Did we have any from last month? I didn't think so. And then item 8.3 is planning commission requests. Any requests of staff or the council? Seeing none, we'll move on to item 9. I'll look for a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Second from Commissioner Frazier. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries. Have a good night, everyone.